Good morning, everyone. Thank you for
Morning.
being here, and thank you for allowing me to share this story. So I've decided to do a little bit of a different testimony about God's healing in my life, and I'd like to share that. So I've lived a life of brokenness, stemming all the way back from my childhood. My parents were together until I was almost 20, but what I witnessed and went through wasn't always love and laughter. We had good days and bad days, as most people do. However, I grew up being scared of being punished due to the abuse I saw my mom go through and the abuse my brother and I had suffered. This led me to be involved in my own abusive relationships. My kid's father was unfaithful, verbally, emotionally, and psychologically abusive. This went off and on for about 4.5 years. My next relationship was worse than the first. I dealt with him being unfaithful many times, and the physical, verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse was terrible. For the first 4, almost 5 years, I was addicted to drugs, partially due to free will, and the other was the pressure of him constantly stealing from me, and it wasn't just my life. I went downhill, but picked myself up. This relationship lasted almost 10 years, and no matter how many times I tried to end it, domestic call after domestic call with the police, he wouldn't leave, and the police wouldn't help me. I was brokenhearted and had serious trust issues. Over the years, my poetry was a way to express my feelings and cry out to God. I prayed, read my Bible, not telling anyone, and I wrote many different poems. I kept them all to myself for a really long time. It was the only thing that kept me going. Between 2009 and 2010, I suspected that my boyfriend at the time was sleeping with a girl who I thought was my friend. I couldn't prove anything, as at that point I decided to work, and I worked 12 to 16-hour days. Often I held 2 jobs just to avoid all the abuse. I was lucky if I had 1 day off a week. In March 2010, I quit a full-time job to start university online during the day and maintained a part-time job in the evenings. But that only lasted about 3 months until June 27, 2010, when I suffered a severe foot and ankle injury while I was out with friends. I got caught in the middle of a bar fight. My foot got trampled on by some guy with cowboy boots. I lost my part-time job but continued to do online classes, but I struggled a lot. Upon losing my part-time job, I began to see life for what it really was. I was upset over the injury, but my eyes were open to the reality that I was right. My boyfriend at the time was sleeping with my supposed-to-be best friend, and they were spending a lot of time together. Turns out, the foot injury was a blessing in disguise. It was God's way of opening my eyes to what was happening right under my nose. Over the next year, I saw multiple doctors, did a bunch of different treatments for my foot and mental health issues, and I also began going through my personal belongings. Out with the old and in with the new, I kept telling myself. I slowly packed my things while looking for a way out of the relationship and to start a new life with my kids. The biggest problem was that I had no money to save because he wouldn't leave, so I had no way of getting assistance, and moving was the only way. The only way I could receive any assistance was to leave, due to, in part, my sick benefits only covered a short period. By 2011, I had reconnected with Carl, who I dated at the age of 14, and he became sort of like my support system. I was also his support system too. He had recently split with his kid's mom, so we spent quite a bit of time talking about our experiences, what we had gone through, and life in general. We became such great friends, and this helped me to get through my separation. I had packed all of mine and my kids' things, plus 2 cats and 2 dogs, and ready to leave, yet nowhere to go. Finally, another friend had a solution. She got me set up to move to her friend's place in January. I must add, her friend was a man. For the first couple months, things were great. Her friend was usually away for work for weeks at a time, so my kids and I basically had the house to ourselves. Then things started to turn sideways. The guy had a couple months off work and began hitting on me, and I felt so uncomfortable and shot him down. He didn't like that, so when he got a girlfriend, things got worse. I had to get out. I spent 2 weeks with my dads, my kids stayed with their grandmother and their dad, my cats went to a friend's, my dogs went to my cousin's. The struggle was real, but I was determined to get through it. 2 weeks into staying with my dad, my cousin informed me that they were doing repairs in their house and my dogs couldn't stay, so this led me to staying with my kids' grandmother and their dad. No matter what was going on, I still managed to smile through each day like nothing was wrong, but inside I was broken. I was an absolute mess. In August 2012, I moved to Bowmanville, still seeing several doctors for a foot injury and mental health and taking a cocktail of medications. I was so brokenhearted, but still smiling my way through each passing day. In 2013, I was reintroduced to the drugs, and that was the start of another downhill battle. In the fall of 2014, Carl and I started seeing each other. It became obvious to those around us that there was something going on. And no matter how many times people asked, we both said no. Finally, near the end of November, we decided to make it official, but the struggle didn't end there. We were both battling addiction, so the first couple years were still rough. Still, I prayed and read my Bible whenever I could. Most nights I would stay up later than Carl, so I could read my Bible and pray. He never knew. Finally, I had the urge one day, and I told him I was done with the drugs completely. Either he was going to get sober with me or he'd have to leave. There was no choice, no more options, and no more time. So we got sober together, beat the addiction. I knew God helped, but I couldn't tell Carl. He wasn't there yet. We've been clean and sober from drugs for over 6 years now and married almost 2. It's clear God healed my broken heart because I couldn't have gotten through it without God. Even though my heart was healed, I still dealt with the pain in my body and the pain from the foot injury. I continued praying and reading my Bible whenever I could, so when Carl's mom was in the hospital in the fall of 2021 and we got the call she went into cardiac arrest, this was the beginning of Carl's search for the meaning of life. He was so broken, he was about to lose his mom, and I was about to lose a dear friend and soon-to-be mother-in-law. I did my best to stay strong for Carl, even though I cried a lot too. But I can only imagine how he was feeling. This was his mom, and this meant she wouldn't be there the day we got married. This took a toll on Carl, and we spent the next while secluding ourselves from everyone and everything. I was worried he may turn to drugs again. Still, we both stayed strong together, and with God's help, we both stayed away from the drugs. Praise God for that. Carl began researching everything in every religion after his mom passed away. And on April 21st, Carl and I were watching a video of a little toddler talking to her mom about Abba, the king. He's coming. You have to give him a present, the toddler said. It melted my heart. By the end of the video, I was in tears and had this overwhelming feeling shoot through my body like never before. I thought maybe I was sitting too long, my legs had fallen asleep, so I stood up and stretched, sat back down, stretched my legs out like I usually did. But this time, my foot that I'd been dealing with so much pain since 2010 was no longer in pain. I was able to stretch my foot without it twitching all over, and I started yelling, "Oh my God, Carl, look at my foot. I can move it and it doesn't even hurt." I jumped up off the couch and started jumping up and down. For the first time in almost 13 years, the pain was gone. I knew in that moment that God had healed me. Then I had my first spiritual encounter with God 2 mornings later. When God spoke the words, "My child, you're ready, tell them Jesus is coming." I vowed to pray more and tell everyone about Jesus. Over the next few months, I noticed several areas of my body that were no longer in pain. I was able to raise both my arms above my shoulders, which was something I couldn't do for over 20 years. I could run again, and so much more. In the fall of 2023, I was required by CAS to get a form filled out by the doctor. I was slightly worried because a couple years earlier, I was told I had a thyroid problem and would need medication for the rest of my life. I told the doctor I'd stopped taking my thyroid stomach pills for almost a year because 1 pill had turned into 2, and there was no way I was going to be on all this medication all over again. So I told Carl before my spiritual encounter with God, I said, well, if this is God's will and this is how he wanted me to live, then so be it. I'm not taking any meds. Not after all the meds I was on for years that clouded my mind and left me zombie-like most days. So on my way to the lab to get the blood work, I prayed to God and said, please let it be normal. You're the only one that can make it all come back normal. 1 week later, the receptionist calls to tell me my blood work came back normal. Oh, the excitement I had when I hung up the phone after hearing the confusion in her voice. You see, we spend so much time relying on science when God is right there waiting to heal us in every way. But the problem is, nobody believes in God the way we should. Between October and March, I had 2 teeth pulled because of an infection in my gums. Well, just a few weeks ago, I'm in the bathroom and I said, oh dear God, please just take this infection out of my mouth. Like, I don't want to see an oral surgeon, and I'm done relying on this crazy science nonsense. The next day, I woke up feeling a dental tool in my mouth at 3 a.m. So when I woke up, I realized God took the infection right out of my gums, took it right out. And that had been there for 20 plus years. So we may have to endure pain for many years, but looking back, I realized that all I needed was a whole lot of faith and to trust in God, but mostly I needed to believe in God with all my heart and soul. God is willing to heal everyone. You just have to believe, have faith, and trust in him.
Praise God.